caregiver. So we've got about 45 minutes. We'll be able to only scratch the surface of this important topic. And I just want to throw out two things. If you're willing and have not already done so, I encourage you to work with a therapist and find a support group. I think the combination of those two are just quite important in this journey. So Jacqueline, maybe you could take a few minutes just to introduce yourself, and then I'll do the same. Oh, I think you're muted.
Of course I am. All right. I am. Hi, everyone. I'd like to start out by telling you that I stutter. You just saw that. And so you'll most likely see some more of that. Not a problem. But I took care of my grandmother and my mom. It was a total of six years while I was caring for both. My grandmother had passed, and I don't know if I ever mourned her because I very quickly had to figure out the financials of making everything continue to flow. Then 5 years after that, I lost my mom, which was in March of 2022. Why did I say it like that? They both had dementia, and so there were many losses that happened along the way. And so I am very familiar with caring for someone that you love, and then mourning while you care for them, and then them not being here, then mourning once they're not here. I've done some of that successfully. I've done some of that not so successfully, and here I am now. So that's who I am.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And my name is Bruce Bradley Gilbert, and I'm in Western Mass. And Jacqueline, I think you're in New York City?
Los Angeles,
I'm sorry, Illinois. Yeah, good. So we're holding you all from opposite sides of the country. I live and work in Western Massachusetts, and I've been facilitating caregiver support groups since 2007. And I've also been a caregiver at different types, in different forms throughout my life. And I just want to throw out a little PR, not to sell a book, but there is actually a book that was published by Simon & Schuster about some of the groups that I originally started with. It's called The Caregivers, a Support Group, Stories of Slow Loss, Courage, and Love. And it's a pretty interesting dive into the role of caregiving and grief. So in 2020, I joined HFC after the pandemic started, and our in-person groups were no longer able to meet. And since the pandemic, and I bet Jacqueline could probably talk about this too, as many of you could, caregiving was impacted dramatically. And the process of grief, I think, was also amplified quite significantly in many, many ways that I've discovered and witnessed. So since 2020, I started a caregiver group, and then many of the care partners had died, had passed away. And so the group actually turned into a bereavement group, and the folks at HFC allowed us to kind of rename our group. And I started a different support group. So I've been learning a lot, and the bereavement group continues to this day. It's a very powerful group. I also do another caregiver group, and just a year ago, January, we started a men's support group for male caregivers specifically. And as we can see on the screen here, male caregivers are pretty rare, and I think they're pretty amazing. So, so what I want to do is I want to speak a little bit about grief, and I'm going to kind of put my clinical hat on for a little bit and just cover some topics that might be important to name and to identify. And as I go through all of this, I'm going to pause and ask for Jackie's input in terms of her experience with some of the things that, the points that I make. First of all, I suspect, I don't know if any of you realize that there are a whole bunch of different kinds of grief out there. There's not just one garden variety grief. And I think a lot of these different kinds of grief emerge in relationship to dementia or Alzheimer's or memory loss. And also, as many of you probably know, grief occurs when individuals are still alive. It's not just grieving the loss of somebody or the death of somebody. It's also often grieving the loss of a person who we've known our whole lives, and we slowly lose them and who they are. So it's really super important that we consider that. And, so that, what I just described is, we call it ambiguous loss, or which is just the loss of somebody who is with us but is not with us at the same time. It creates a lot of confusion and internal ambivalence about how we should go forward. Another kind of grief is anticipatory grief. In caregiver groups, a lot of times there's this wonderful opportunity for people who are caring for loved ones in later stages compared to earlier stages of the diseases, and anticipating losses throughout the stages of the disease. It's almost as if the grief reemerges each stage.
Yes.
So those are the two primary parts of or types of grief, I think. And there's another part that I didn't write down, but it's called complex grief. And complex grief is often the type of grief where it makes the care provider or caregiver, it really impacts them to the degree where you can't function. You can't, it's almost like a post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, things like sleeplessness, or you can't stop crying. You might have perseverative thoughts and things like that. And that's a type of grief, as all of them are, that really deserves some help, getting some support. So two more things, and then I'm gonna, because I saw Jacqueline kind of nodding her head there, and I want to hear some of her experiences. But the guilt and shame is a big part of grief, and it shows up in surprising ways. I can't tell you how many caregivers I've heard and listened to their stories, and I felt like, oh my God, these are super men and women. They're amazing, and they consistently say, you know what, I'm not doing a good enough job, or, you know, I failed my loved one. And I think that is certainly something that makes sense, but also it's something that really doesn't make sense at the same time. Even things like, you know, I'm responsible for certain forms of suffering. And then the last quality of grief I want to talk about right now is sometimes the surprising element of relief arrives when somebody we've cared for a very long time passes away. And you'd think relief would not be part of the equation, but we're talking about caring for somebody we love, but also we're taking on a commitment that is quite stressful and heartbreaking and exhausting, and sometimes our own health gets kind of compromised by that. So I'm just gonna pause, and Jackie, I don't know if any of those losses or forms of grief have applied to you.
Yes. I'm actually tearing up thinking about it right now. I know I absolutely experienced anticipatory grief while caring for my mom. It was one of the major moments when it really hit me was, I think, when my mom became incontinent. We all know that, like, that's one of those steps that confirms that the person we are caring for is losing body, the slow down, excuse me, losing bodily autonomy. And we know that it just means that they're slowly stepping into another stage. And that one hit me really hard. On top of that, there came one moment where my mom forgot that she was my mom. And there's so few people that you can talk to who really understand what this feels like. And so searching out some sort of support, I think, is really important.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is from the Coast Pharmacy. Is this Judy?
This is she.
Hi, we were calling because doctor sent over a prescription for you.
You.
Yes.
Would you mind?
They sent in
That's not-
oxytocin, which is
I
55.
love Zoom.
I don't think we should be hearing this. We're okay now.
Okay.
Yes. Someone had commented saying that dementia is a collection of tiny deaths, and that's so true.
So I'd like to think a little bit with you all about coping strategies. I don't know if anybody, and feel free to nod your head or what have you, but if any of you have, we're losing people, yikes. Yeah, I've struggled with the idea of coping because it can be hard and sometimes you can kind of lose hope. So I like to sort of imagine coping as immediate, short-term, and long-term, and thinking about, oh, are we by ourselves?
No, we're not by ourselves. There's plenty of
Really?
people in here.
Oh, really? Thank you.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
Okay, good. I just lost all the pictures. Yikes.
Okay.
So thinking about what to do in terms of coping, and I think immediately it's really important, like you had said, Jacqueline, finding help, so that you're not all alone. I worked with a woman down in Texas during all of the all of the floods and all of that, who was all by herself with her mom. I was her lifeline in one of the HFC support groups. Also, daily structure is really super important. Kind of finding a way of not being stuck in one role for all the time. And finally, the longer term is to set up a support network out there of friends and other family members, but also to affiliate with groups of people find shared interests, meaningful relationships. Consider, the difference between depleting activity and nourishing activity, and try to decrease the depleting and increase the nourishing activities. So, so maybe I'll pause and have you kind of weigh in, Jacqueline.
Yeah. One thing that I wish I would have done when my mom passed was set up some sort of routine for myself even. What happened when she had passed was that the caregivers that we were paying stopped showing up. And so like the community that we had made that was set around caring for my mom had suddenly been finished. And so I had went from, having people at my house nearly 24/7 to then sleeping in a home with no one there at all. And it was just such a stark change. And I wish I had known like that this would be the time to seek out support from people who have most likely gone through something similar, because people who haven't usually don't have the capacity or the knowledge. And I wish I would have been much more kinder to myself also.
Yeah. It's funny because I can't tell you what, on screen, the support groups, that when I first started doing these groups on screen, I was a little bit like, oh, we can't do this, this can't happen. But like you're saying, Jacqueline, the amount of humor and tears and connection that can happen on screen is just quite powerful. I do think a good solid hug is always a lot more helpful, but yeah. And in terms of ways of coping, that description that you had in terms of, your care network kind of disappeared after your loss.
Yeah.
I think is quite a powerful, heartbreaking experience. And I wanted to think a little bit about that and about other experiences related to grief when people really find that they've hit their bottom, and ways of formulating or understanding what's going on. I don't know if anybody out there is ever taking Psychology 101, but there's a model out there that called The Hierarchy of Needs by Abraham Maslow that I always like to think about when I'm thinking about the role of grief and the role of caregiving. A lot of times we kind of do things backwards. We try to, we focus on the big ticket items of what's the meaning of life. Am I actually making a difference? Am I doing a good job and all of that? And what happens is eventually we lose touch with some of those more fundamental needs. And so I don't know if anybody here has ever had experience where you start losing sleep, or you have insomnia, or maybe your eating patterns change, or just those basic needs. You don't even have time to go to the bathroom because of the caregiving roles or because of the grief. So taking care of basic needs, getting sleep, breathing is a big one, especially if panic or anxiety is. So Maslow talks about on the bottom is basic needs, and it goes all the way up to some more of those more complex needs. And I recommend that people take care of those boring basic needs. Like if you're grieving or if you're struggling, get up and brush your teeth. Get up and have a cup of coffee. Get up and walk around a little bit. And then, make sure you're safe and secure as well. Make sure you know how to reach out to people. make sure you know what you need to relax and calm down. There's a wonderful, yeah, be gentle with yourself. Thank you, Jacqueline. There's a wonderful field out there called sensory integration, which looks at different activities that we can do for self-soothing. And they break it up into alerting activities versus calming activities. Sometimes when you're struggling, taking a warm bath and listening to Beethoven would be nice. There are some people, though, who struggle. A warm bath and Beethoven is the exact opposite of what they need. So they might need to dance to The Cure, or kind of blast some Led Zeppelin. And physiologically, we do have different needs in terms of how to address our distress. And then finally, love and belonging. When we're struggling, it's so important to find people. And so many people in our country, I'm sure some of you have realized that we have a problem with loneliness in our country. And it's across the board, but I think loneliness just escalates when we're in caregiver roles. And so finding ways of reaching out, and that's what Hilarity for Charity, I think, does a fantastic job with. So I'm going to say two more things, and then I'm going to leave it over to Jackie, because I'm feeling myself talking too much. But one is physicality. There's this guy, Bessel van der Kolk, out there who wrote the book, The Body Knows the Score. And he talks about the importance of physical activity, walking, dancing, exercising, yoga, and the way that kind of reconnects our mind and body, especially when we're struggling. So physicality, and then the arts is the other way. That's an earlier presentation. I was with Trevor Noah and stuff. And being able to express ourselves, music and art and dance and drama, is another way not only of expressing some of those deep, painful activities that are going on within us, but it's also a way to find and connect to other people and ourselves. So I'm going to pause there, Jackie. Maybe if you have any thoughts about any of that.
I would like to know, what would you suggest for would you suggest that someone plan out how to care for themselves prior to the person that they're caring for passing, so that they have some sort of setup plan?
Absolutely. Two things. That's why the benefit of one of the huge benefits I didn't realize in the support group, especially the men's support group. I could say this because I'm a guy, but men are really lousy at planning, and they could really, and so it's just lovely about how these guys who are in the later stages of caregiving are able to sort of inform and tell stories for the newer men in the group. And also, how in the bereavement group, how people are really struggling with what to do with themselves after all that activity just goes away and all the care team and networks disappear. So structure, and I even like the concrete method, getting a piece of paper with 7 days a week and 12 hours a day, and starting to fill in the blanks, because an empty piece of paper representing a schedule is one of the most terrifying things in the world. So, and having a nice balance of doing things with other people versus doing things alone. There's a gigantic difference, I'm sure, Jackie, you know, and others, between loneliness and solitude. I think loneliness is when we desperately need connection with other people, and it's very painful. Whereas solitude is when we desperately need some time by ourselves to kind of digest and sort of breathe and be private and kind of curl up into that ball. So yes.
So I think a question that I have is, how do you deal with family that kind of oversteps when you are in a state of mourning? A personal example from my life is that my aunt flew into town when my mom had passed, and I might cry. She washed my mom's sheets, and it broke my heart. I was like, "Ah." And then on top of that, she had my dad paint a bedroom in my house that was painted purple because she didn't like the color, but that was the color that my mom and I had chosen for it. And I did not know how to handle it at that time. And my mom has now not been here for about 2 years, and that still makes me fiery angry. And
Oh,
like, how would you tell someone to work through that?
ah. Well, off the record, I get really mad at them. And say a whole bunch of words I probably shouldn't say here. But on the record, yeah, I mean, this is one of these things when you land in a caregiver role or even a grief role, you have to sort of start from scratch. And so things like effective communication or asserting ourselves, finding our own authority, our own agency, because you've had your agency throughout all of the hard work of caregiving, and then suddenly these other people come bumbling into your life and start moving things around. And I mean, the story about washing your mom's sheets just hits me at the core.
Uh,
I mean, the role of scent or the role of warmth or crumpling and whatever is so important to our experience as human beings. So then there's my other answer to your wonderful question is there's an acronym out there. Some of you might have heard of, but it's considered the 3 C's, which is choose, connect, and communicate. And choosing is, and this is hard for a lot of people, but choosing what's best for you. So in your most dark bouts of grief, you still have the dignity of choice. And if you have a caregiver like rambling away, you have the right to say stop. I don't have the bandwidth or the to listen to you right now. Stop. And it doesn't mean you have to be mean about it, but just stop and look. I will get back to you, but right now I need to ground myself. And, so in choosing, we're taking back the loss of control that grief often brings. So the second C is connection. Connect with people. And that, again, something that comes up in support groups all the time is people go to support groups because support groups speak a language. Support groups speak a language. Oh my God, Brennan, it's so nice to see you, and Audrey in your background. Speak a language in terms of, oh, Brendan, I'm going to cry, and threw me off here. But anyway, other caregivers allow us to kind of get it. They know our language. They know what it's like, whereas other family members don't know what it's like. And so connecting, we're wired for connection, and which leads to isolation, but it's important not to remove yourself from others' lives. Finally, the third C is put your needs out there. Say to others, this is going to be awkward or weird, but this is what I need.
yeah.
I don't need 15 lasagnas, but this is what I need. And it's okay for you to ask how you're doing.
Once I had gotten to the point where I was ready to be social, I had sent texts saying, hey friends, I know I haven't, hung out in a while, but here I am now, and please invite me out. And so many of them showed up.
Those are good friends.
Yeah.
Those are good friends. Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have those good friends, get a support, get people out there to help you find them. Because caregivers, I think caregivers are the most amazingly wonderful people in the world who also are good friends. They're not radioactive. Caregivers and people in grief aren't to be avoided. They need us to lean in as long as we listen to what they need. Because leaning in is important, but we have to listen to when they can't take it. Yeah. So I'm realizing here we have about 5 to 10 minutes. And I'm wondering if there's anybody out there who would like to kind of ask Jacqueline and I a question or.
Yeah, so we actually have some.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
One of the questions is, let me see. Can you touch base on taking care of yourself during the grief while feeling burnt out from caregiving?
Yeah. That reminds me of the body and mind. Like literally our body could be exhausted and our mind could be racing 1,000 miles a minute, or vice versa. Our mind could be totally shut down and our body can be all revved up and jittery. And so I think really considering those two areas and really learning what we need, not what everybody thinks we need, but what we need, and getting a therapist who might know us well to help us with that. Yeah.
There's one comment that says, I feel so brittle all of the time. And honestly, that's how I feel also. And I don't know if it'll change.
Yes.
I think that mourning someone changes who you are.
Yes.
Who you are. And I don't know if I'll ever know the person that I was prior. And I think it's just a long process of learning to accept that you are now much softer.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh boy. This is a conversation I've had a lot. Especially, actually, I've heard a lot today in other breakout sessions about siblings or other members of the family who aren't as involved. And one of the things I hear consistently is caregiving is the hardest thing in the world. And caregivers grieve hard, it hits so hard. But in retrospect, when they start to kind of come out of that cocoon, that space, and they do work with it, they wouldn't do it any other way. And in fact, they grieve for the brother or the sister who avoided. They grieve the fact that the brother or sister that avoided it never had the opportunity to share the experience with the parent, the mother or the father. Because grief and loss, it's one more stage of living, and death is. There's a wonderful poem by David White called the Well of Grief. I'm not even gonna try to say it, but if anybody wants to look out there for the Well of Grief, it's a lovely poem that speaks to what Jacqueline just referenced.
Some of what helps me also is when I'm feeling just really sad and I try to remind myself that the level of sorrow that I feel, I have the capacity to feel that in joy also now.
Yes,
And so
that's the thing.
the dichotomy exists, and now I just have to find my way to the oh my gosh, I'm stuttering so much because I'm emotional. Y'all got me emotional. I have to find my way to the other side of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacqueline, I think we're out of time.
That's so sad.
I know it is. I feel like we're just warming up.
I know.
I love all the comments. Thank you all for making these comments. And, you know, Missy Harden, you said, can you speak to the importance of bereavement? And I hope we've been doing that because it is so super, super important. Yes, we did go too fast. I encourage you all to find a support group for a good therapist, and bless you. Thank you for your caregiving roles. Man, you are doing important work. And Jacqueline, you too. You're my hero.
I love us. I love us so much, and I want to stand for us. And I just want to let everyone here know who has cared for someone or who is currently caring for someone that, like, I'm holding so much space because I know that it takes every part of you. It really does.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah. We'll end the meeting now.